Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Ishra Jahan with top stories. US signals shift in Syria, Iraq campaign against Islamic State. China warns US after warship sails by man-made islands. Hillary Clinton and the authenticity of her feminism. FBI opens probe into violent arrest of black student. Canada wellboat stability questioned by investigators. Saqib remains number 1 all-rounder in ICC ranking. Now the details. Defense Secretary Ash Carter said there would also be more airstrikes against high-value targets. Observers say these comments reflect acknowledgement of the lack of progress in defeating the militant group. Separately, the US says Iran is being invited for the first time to international talks over Syria's war. Mr. Carter's comment made to the Senate Armed Services Committee came a week after US Iraqi forces rescued dozens of hostages held by IS in Iraq. We won't hold back from supporting capable partners in opportunistic attacks against ISIL or conducting such missions directly, whether by strikes from the air or direct action of the ground, Mr. Carter said, using an alternative acronym for IS. We expect to intensify our air campaign, including with additional US and coalition aircraft, to target ISIL with a higher and heavier rate of strikes, he said. This will include more strikes against ISIL high-value targets as our intelligence improves. A US-led coalition began airstrikes against IS positions in Iraq and Syria last year. President Barack Obama said the objective was to degrade and ultimately destroy IS. Although President Obama has not committed ground forces to Iraq, the US has about 3,500 troops in the country who have been helping to train Iraqi forces and also have a limited combat role. Russia started its own airstrikes in Syria at the end of last month, saying it wants to help President Bashar al-Assad defeat IS and other extremists. China has reacted angrily after a US naval warship sailed through disputed waters into the South China Sea, saying the move threatened its sovereignty. A Chinese guided missile destroyer and a naval patrol ship shadowed and gave warnings to the US warship, according to law, China's defense ministry said on Tuesday. The US patrol was a coercive action that seeks to militarize the South China Sea region and an abuse of freedom of navigation under international law, it added. Beijing said the USS Lassen illegally entered Chinese territory when it sailed early on Tuesday near the Spratly or Nansha group of islands. The action threatened China's sovereignty and security interests, endangered the safety of staff and equipment on those islands, and harmed regional peace and stability. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang said. Lu said Washington should correct the mistake immediately to avoid further harm to Chinese-US relations. US Defense Secretary Ash Carter, testifying on Tuesday to the Senate Armed Services Committee, said that the USS Lassen had passed within 12 nautical miles of a Chinese artificial island. You can be a completely unenthusiastic about Hillary Clinton and still be a feminist, tweeted Vice contributing editor Sarah Jiang. The blunt statement came on the heels of Clinton's strong performance in the first Democratic primary debate, striking a particularly disheartening note for a candidate who is losing ground with the one consistency that ought to be her own. A CNN ORC poll shows Clinton as experiencing a nationwide slide among female voters from 75% in December 2014 down to 51% in August 2015. 8 years after her first presidential bid, her campaign narrative is taking a familiar turn. Hillary Clinton now has a woman problem. The headlines are eerily similar, as are the reasons offered for the disillusionment. Feminists are still unhappy as ever with her voting record. Clinton's controversial vote to authorize the Iraq war was held against her in 2008. Today, it's a late and grudging support for gay marriage. More damaging, however, are the continuing issues with her character. A Wall Street Journal NBC News poll conducted in August found that was just 35% of white women have a positive view of her, and 58% of women in a Fox News poll says that Clinton knowingly lied with regards to the ongoing email controversy surrounding her time as Secretary of State. Women don't seem to trust Hillary. The FBI and the U.S. Justice Department have opened investigation into the violent arrest of a black female high school student by a white police officer, photos of which has gone viral and sparked outrage. The agencies have opened a civil rights investigation into the circumstances surrounding the arrest of a student at Spring Valley High School. FBI Special Agent David Thomas told on Tuesday, the FBI will collect all available facts and evidence in order to determine whether a federal law was violated. The hashtag assault at Spring Valley High was trending on Twitter on Monday as the videos, which appeared to have been taken by other students on their mobile phones, went viral. Hillary Clinton, the fourth runner from the Democratic presidential nomination, tweeted her outrage on Tuesday. There is no excuse for violence inside a school. The assault at Spring Valley High is unacceptable. Schools should be safe places, Clinton said. U.S. media identified the officer as Ben Fields, one of the two officers assigned to the school. Fields had been placed as administrative leave pending an internal investigation. NBC said the Fields was named as a defendant in a 2013 federal lawsuit that claims he unfairly and recklessly targets African American students with allegations of gang membership and criminal gang activity. The Leviathan II, which was carrying 27 people, sank near Tofino, British Columbia on Sunday afternoon. Canadian investigators said a wave hit the vessel from the night, causing it to list to one side before capsizing. A 27-year-old Australian man from Sydney is still missing. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada said its investigation will continue on Wednesday, when the vessel will be examined to understand its condition at the time of the accident. This will include reviewing stability information at the time of its construction and examining any modifications that have been made since its initial constructions that may have affected its stability, a statement said. David Thomas, 50, and his son Stephen, 17, from Swindon were among those who died. Stephen's mother, Julie, was rescued from the Leviathan II. Nigel Hooker, 63, from Southampton, Salford born from Jack Slater, 76, who had lived in Canada for many years, and Katie Taylor, 29, who was living in Whistler, British Columbia, also died. All five were open upper deck of the boat, but were not wearing life jackets. Regional Coroner Mac Brown told a news conference. The other passengers were all in an enclosed part of the boat. Iceland and Norway are outside the European Union but are part of the European Economic Area, which will allow them to trade into the single market. But Mr. Cameron is expected to say that arrangement will not work for the UK. A number 10 source said Norway accepts some EU rules with little say in the decisions made in Brussels. Oslo also pays about €600 million a year to the EU. Unlike the UK, Norway has no veto in the European Council, no votes in the EU's Council of Ministers, no MEPs or votes in the European Parliament, and no European Commissioner to help. The source said. Norway is also signed up to the Europe's free movement rules. The source said to a similar arrangement for the UK would do little to reduce the number of EU migrants heading to Britain. Some British Eurosceptics look to Norway's position as a model for the UK if it were to leave the EU. This summit in Iceland will mark a change in David Cameron's tone and pace. Until now, he has avoided saying too much about the campaigns to stay and leave, as he tries to get a better deal for the UK inside the EU and retain the option of leaving if he can't. The motion won more support than it has done in the past, with 191 members of the 193-member body voting in favor. Only the US and Israel opposed the resolution, which is non-binding. The US has earlier abstained if the resolution's language differed significantly from previous ones. The UN General Assembly has voted in favor of the resolution condemning the US embargo on Cuba for years since 1992. Last year, the US and Israel voted against the resolution, while 3 countries abstained. In July, the US and Cuba reopened embassies in each other's capitals and restored full diplomatic ties. Relations have been frozen since the early 1960s when the US broke links and imposed a trade embargo on Cuba. US President Barack Obama last month told UNGA he expected the US Congress to ultimately lift the embargo. However, the move is opposed by the Republicans who control Congress. Viewers, will take a short break. Stay with us. We are back in a moment with the headlines here. Kosovo signs deal to deepen ties with European Union. Ex-Australia PM Abbott tells Europe to close borders. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg attends India's students' meeting. Top security measures taken, Bangladesh ensures Japan MPs. FIFA candidate Sheikh Salman torture claims are nasty lies. Let's move to the next news. Prime Minister Isa Mustafa said the agreement sealed Kosovo's path towards joining the EU. Kosovo split from Serbia in 2008, a decade after a conflict between Serb forces and Kosovan Albanian rebels. Serbia has not recognized Kosovo's independence, but in August it signed key agreements to normalize ties, a condition for its own EU accession. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said the deal with Kosovo represented an important contribution to stability and prosperity in Kosovo and the region at large. The Stabilization and Association Agreement is the first key step for non-EU countries on the path towards membership of the bloc. It requires the country concerned to ensure that its governance and civil society norms, for example on human rights and the judiciary, are brought up to EU standards. It also involves a commitment to improve trade relations with candidate countries having to open up their economies in return for EU help. It is the road of strengthening democracy and building the rule of law, the road of political stability and economic prosperity, said Mr. Mustafa. In Serbia, the head of the government office for Kosovo, Marko Dežurić, said the agreement does not and never will mean to us that our province is a separate state. However, Serbia too is keen to join the EU, and Prime Minister Aleksandar Vučić said the country's deal to normalize ties with Kosovo meant there were no longer any obstacles in his country's path. Mr. Abbott made comments in London where he was speaking at the second annual Margaret Thatcher lecture. He said misguided altruism was leading much of Europe into catastrophic error. Under Mr. Abbott, Australia introduced border controls that stopped migrant boats reaching the country. Hundreds of thousands of people have now fled conflicts in the Middle East, mostly Syria, and sought asylum in European countries. The UN says most arrivals are not economic migrants, but people fleeing war and persecution. Most are arriving by boat before walking across Europe. In his first major speech since being ousted by his party, Mr. Abbott said no country or continent can open its borders to all comers without fundamentally weakening itself. He was speaking to an audience of ministers and members of the governing Conservative Party at London's Guildhall. There are tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of people living in poverty and danger who might readily seek to enter a Western country if the opportunity is there, Mr. Abbott said. Who could blame them? Yet no country or continent can open its borders to all comers without fundamentally weakening itself. This is the risk that the countries of Europe now run through misguided altruism, Mr. Abbott said according to our copy of his speech. A militia spokesman told the BBC the helicopter was shot down in the Almaty coastal region, which has seen clashes between rival militias. The helicopter, which had been carrying cash for a local bank on the way out and was returning with passengers to Tripoli. Local media say the dead may have included high-ranking militia members. Bank workers were also reportedly on board. The civilian bank staff were from the town of Sorman, the militia spokesman said. Libya has been hit by instability since the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, with numerous militias each governing their own patches of territory. Report says some 900 students are attending the session at Indian Institute of Technology. Last month, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the headquarters of Facebook in California. With more than 130 million users, India is Facebook's largest market outside the United States. Mr. Zuckerberg gave a short speech before taking questions from the students on Wednesday. Last month, Mr. Modi hailed the political power of social media during his visit to the Facebook headquarters. Mr. Modi has said he wants to connect all India's villages to the internet. Around 1 billion Indians currently lack internet access. Facebook says its Internet Organization project, which offers free access to a bundle of mobile phone web apps, can help get the developing world online. But it has drawn criticism in India, accused of favoring Facebook over local services. Mr. Zuckerberg had promised to open the scheme to a wide range of apps. Mr. Zuckerberg visited the Taj Mahal on Tuesday. It is even more stunning than I expected. It's incredible what people can build and what love can motivate us to build, he wrote on Facebook. Bangladesh Ambassador to Japan Masood bin Momen has assured Japanese MPs members and business leaders about top security measures taken by the government of Bangladesh for all foreign nationals. He also urged Japanese MPs and business leaders to conduct their frequent visits to Bangladesh to boost up existing bilateral relations. Ambassador Masood was speaking at a dinner on Tuesday hosted by the Embassy of Bangladesh in Tokyo in honor of the members of the Japan-Bangladesh Parliamentary Friendship League in New Otani Hotel, said a foreign ministry press note. About a dozen died as well as 20 high-level Japanese business leaders from Mitsubishi, Toshiba, Toray, Marubeni, Obayashi, Itochi and government officials were present on the program. Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister of Japan and the President of Japan-Bangladesh Parliamentary Friendship League Taro also MP attended the event as the chief guest. The Parliamentary League was reconstituted last year with 65 members. The event began with welcome remarks by Secretary General of the League Ichiro Tsukada MP. Ambassador Masood bin Momen congratulated Japan on its election as a permanent member of UN Security Council and mentioned that as a peace-loving nation and genuine development partner, Japan always gets special respect from Bangladesh and its people. Deputy Prime Minister Taro also in his speech appreciated the launching of comprehensive partnership between the two countries last year and pledged for continued Japanese support and cooperation for Bangladesh. Bangladesh Embassy also organized an IT promotion event yesterday at city's Xinhua Prince Hotel. Bangladesh Ambassador Masood bin Momen inaugurated the matchmaking B2B event in presence of BASIS President Shamim Ahsan and Senior Director Jetro Takashi Suzuki. About 24 Japanese IT companies and 12 Bangladesh IT companies participated at the B2B event. Viewers, now the business news. If passed by both houses, the two-year deal will increase spending by $80 billion. It will also be the last budget deal reached by President Barack Obama, lasting until March 2017. The government needs to raise its borrowing limit by 3rd November of risk defaulting its own debts. The Treasury Department had already postponed 2 bond sales as it waited for an agreement. The deal is the last to be reached by House Speaker John Boehner before he retires from Congress. He is expected to hand the reins of Speaker to Republican Paul Ryan on Thursday and retire on Friday. On Tuesday, Mr. Ryan criticized Mr. Boehner and President Obama for reaching the terms behind closed doors, saying the process stinks. Mr. Ryan said he was reserving judgment on the argument because he had not yet reviewed it. But he added this was not the way to do the people's business, and under new management we are not going to do it this way. The central bank is not expected to raise rates, but investors will be watching for any clues on timing. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 was up to 0.42% at 18,867.67 points, ahead of several company earnings due out later. There is also speculation that Japan's central bank may expand its stimulus measures when it meets on Friday. In Australia, the benchmark S&P ASX 200 was flat, down just 0.3% at 5,343.90 in early trade. Shares in one of the country's biggest lenders, National Australia Bank, were down as much as 1.3% after the bank's cash earnings for the period missed expectations. The lender's cash earnings, which strip out one-off accounting items and is the bank's preferred measure, rose 15.5% to $5.84 billion. Australia's headline consumer price index also came in less than expected for 3 months to September, rising 0.5% quarter on quarter. Analysts say the number may see Australia's central bank cuts its lending rates again. The fact that inflation is lower than expected and below target despite a 20% plus fall in the value of the over the last year adds to the case for the RBA to cut the cash rate again in order to offset the potential negative impact on the economy of big bank mortgage rate hikes, said AMP Capital's chief economist Shane Oliver. In China, the Shanghai Composite was down 0.41% at 3,421.4, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was down 0.28% at 23,075.76. In South Korea, the benchmark Kospi Index was down 0.32% at 2,038.57. Viewers, now the sports news. Sheikh Salman has been accused by Bahraini human rights group of helping to identify players and other athletes involved in 2011 democracy protests. He was head of the Bahrain Football Association and a member of the ruling royal family when security forces put down mass Shia-led protests calling for political reforms. Several people died while others were arrested, detained and tortured. I cannot deny something that I haven't done, the 49-year-old told BBC Sport. Such accusations are not just damaging, it's really hurting. Some people have agenda on their table. Sheikh Salman added, it's not just damaging me, it's damaging the people and the country. These are false, mass lies that have been repeated again and again in the past and the present. Applications to succeed Sepp Blatter as president of football's world governing body had to be submitted by 23 GMT on Monday. Bangladesh number 1 all-rounder Tiger Shakib Al Hasan still in the top spot in ICC's Test player rankings. In the new tables put up on Tuesday by the ICC, English batsman Joe Root got the spot, the number 1 ranked Test batsman. Pakistan's arm spinner Yasir Shah is in the second spot for the first time in his career in the latest ICC Test player rankings, and Dale Steyn still has the top position. The ranks were published after the Dubai and Colombo tests were over. Yasir picked up 8 for 180 in Pakistan's 178 runs victory in Dubai. This gave him 25 points. Root scored 88 and 71 in the Dubai test that made him come back to the top spot in the batsman ranking. Australia captain Stephen Smith is still at the top till Tuesday. Root, who entered the test trailing Smith by 13 points, now leads the Australian by just 3 points. In the ICC test team rankings, there is no change. Sri Lanka and West Indies continue to hold the 7th and 8th position respectively. Viewers, let's have a look at Millennium TV News Recap. US signals shift in Syria, Iraq campaign against Islamic State. China warns US after warship sails by man-made islands. Hillary Clinton and the authenticity of her feminism. FBI opens probe into violent arrest of black student. Canada wellboat stability questioned by investigators. Saqib remains number 1 all-rounder in ICC ranking. You are up to date with the top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you and stay with Millennium TV. Allah Hafiz.